The church smelled exactly like money and old roses. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The crystal chandeliers in the historic chapel dripped light onto the $70,000 worth of white peonies. My dress, custom-made Vera Wang, felt heavy and cold against my skin. I was 28. This was supposed to be my pinnacle. Liam stood across from me. He was wearing a custom tux from Savile Row. His smile was dazzling, the kind that got him promoted in investment banking. His eyes, though, were slightly too bright, a nervous, guilty excitement. I knew what it was. I just had to wait for the cue. The minister cleared his throat. He droned through the usual lines about love and commitment. I squeezed the tiny, specialized presentation remote hidden in the bouquet of white roses. My hands weren't shaking. They were dead steady. I was a litigation paralegal. This was just my biggest case yet. Then came the moment. If anyone can show just cause why this couple may not lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Liam's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He was expecting the silence. He was expecting the victory. I took a deep, slow breath. The sound of the microphone clicking on was surprisingly loud. I object. The word wasn't shouted. It was a precise, clear statement. It was the sound of a closing argument. The entire chapel gasped. It was a beautiful, unified sound. Liam spun around, his face draining of color. "May, what are you doing?" he hissed. I didn't answer him. I was looking past him, directly at the first row. My sister, Chloe. She was 32, the definition of a beautiful, narcissistic nightmare. She was sitting there, wearing a dress that was subtly too nice for a sister. A smug, tiny smirk played on her lips. She thought this was a joke. She thought I was having a breakdown. I didn't hire a lawyer for an objection. I continued, my voice gaining strength. I hired a sound engineer and a professional projectionist and a forensic accountant. I pressed the button on the remote. Hard. A hydraulic whirring sound echoed through the silent chapel. A massive high-definition screen dropped down from the ceiling, right above the antique altar. The perfect backdrop for judgment. The projectionist, hidden in the choir loft, was already running the loop. The music started. It wasn't the traditional processional music. It was the main theme from The Godfather. Slow, dark, and inevitable. The screen lit up. The first image was a text message thread. Black background, white font, undeniable. Chloe's contact photo was next to it. Chloe, 11:47 p.m. Your place is better. She's too predictable. Liam, 11:51 p.m. I know. Tonight? I need to burn off the stress of looking interested in her latest Asian financial journal. The image shifted to high-resolution video footage, grainy but utterly clear. It was the guest bedroom of our shared apartment, the one Liam claimed he used for late-night work calls. Liam and Chloe. The timestamp in the corner read 2 weeks ago. I watched their faces. They weren't just hooking up. They were laughing. They looked comfortable. Liam let out a strangled, animal sound. He lunged toward me, but my best man, Ben, who happened to be a 6'4" corporate security specialist, intercepted him with a casual hand on the shoulder. Ben's grip was immediate and firm. The crowd noise swelled. Shouts, crying, the sickening sound of realization. My father looked like he'd been hit by a truck. My mother was clutching her pearls. The footage continued to loop. Then, the screen cut to a dense legal document. The prenuptial agreement. A giant red arrow pointed to Clause 7.3b, financial penalty for demonstrable infidelity occurring within 18 months of the scheduled marriage ceremony established by video evidence. I lowered the bouquet, letting the remote fall into the folds of the dress. I looked at Liam, whose face was now a toxic purple. Then I looked at Chloe, who was finally realizing this wasn't a joke. Her eyes were wide, panicked. She tried to stand up, but my mother grabbed her arm, holding her in place like an angry vice. I leaned into the microphone. My voice was a soft, deadly purr. Liam, you signed that prenup, and I have the evidence. This isn't just an objection. This is a divorce proceeding, before the marriage even started. But let me back up. My name is May. People always describe me as put together. They think that's a compliment. What they really mean is I never show weakness. I didn't get where I am, a top-tier paralegal in a massive corporate law firm, by being soft. I got there by being meticulous, calm, and seeing every human interaction as a contract. I met Liam in a typical high-finance way, a networking event in Manhattan. He was an investment banker, smooth, polished, and expensive. He had that killer confidence that only comes from knowing your parents are worth 9 figures. We were perfect on paper, the driven Asian American woman and the charming white financier. Our parents approved immediately. It was a business merger disguised as romance. Our relationship was structured. Dinner reservations were made weeks in advance. Birthdays were celebrated with gifts that appreciated in value. We discussed our careers more than our feelings. It worked for me. I wanted stability and power. Liam was the perfect access point to that world. He gave me the security I needed, and I gave him the quiet, competent partner who made him look good at work functions. The problem, the foundational flaw in my whole life, was Chloe, my older sister. She was a constant toxic presence. Chloe was the beautiful, dramatic one, the one who got attention just by walking into a room. I was always the smart one, the reliable one. That distinction was her currency. She needed to feel superior, and she did it by subtly minimizing me. When I started dating Liam, Chloe's radar went up immediately. She didn't have a stable career. She worked as an interior designer who relied mostly on family connections and trust fund allowances. She hated that I was building my own empire. She hated that Liam genuinely admired my focus. Their early interactions were sickeningly familiar. Chloe would start with a casual compliment that felt like a cut. "Oh, May, that dress is lovely. It almost distracts from your serious lawyer face." Or to Liam, in front of me, "Isn't it cute how obsessed May is with her spreadsheets?" I could never focus that long. Liam was too polite, or maybe too clueless, to notice the edge. He just laughed it off. "She's a machine, Chloe. That's why I love her." I noticed every single subtle dig. I filed them away. I didn't react. Reaction was weakness. I learned long ago that the best revenge is always cold and structural. The wedding planning started after Liam proposed during a ridiculously elaborate trip to Paris. He chartered a small plane just to propose over the Alps. Over the top, unnecessary, and exactly what Chloe would have wanted. From the start, Chloe warmed her way into the process. She wasn't the maid of honor, that was Ben's wife, Sarah. Chloe insisted on being the wedding stylist. This meant she sat in on every planning meeting, making passive-aggressive suggestions. "May, those invitations are beautiful, but they scream corporate takeover, not romance. You should lighten up. Liam, are you sure about this venue? It feels a little safe. Doesn't May want something more daring?" I agreed to the massive chapel and the huge budget just to shut her up. I let her think she was in control of the aesthetics. Meanwhile, I was focused on the actual contracts. The prenuptial agreement was my magnum opus. I spent 3 months drafting it. Liam's family had old money. My family had new, earned money. My firm specialized in protecting high net worth individuals. I knew every loophole. Liam barely read it. His own lawyer told him it was aggressive, but Liam was confident. He saw himself as the benevolent husband-to-be. "May, you worry too much," he said, signing the last page without reading the appendices. "We're not going to fail." I just smiled faintly. "It's just insurance, darling. You know I love coverage, but I specifically added the infidelity clause. It wasn't about distrust at the time. It was about creating a deterrent, a financial trap, a mechanism of control. I made the penalty absolute ruin for him. If he cheated before we hit the 3-year mark, he would forfeit the apartment, lose a significant chunk of his investment portfolio, and pay me a massive lump sum that effectively bankrupt him. I buried the clause deep in the section about dissolution events due to material breach of trust. Liam's lawyer missed the severity of that clause entirely. They focused on the asset division, they didn't focus on the penalty. The wedding date was set for October, the peak of fall foliage in upstate New York. Chloe was ecstatic, constantly talking about the vibe and the color palette. Liam was stressed about work, often distant. I thought it was just the pressures of a big promotion he was chasing. I dismissed the slight chill in our interactions. I should have known better. I should have trusted my gut, which was telling me that Chloe's recent presence was suddenly less hostile and more collaborative. She was spending more time with us, but less time insulting me. She was almost too helpful with Liam's bachelor party planning. That was the first red flag I actively suppressed. I was too busy being the put-together woman. I was too focused on the contract to see the breach already happening. The closer we got to the day, the tighter my focus became. I was counting down the days until I had the title of wife and all the social, financial, and legal benefits that came with it. I thought I was winning. I thought I had secured my position. I didn't realize that in the world of emotional contracts, my sister had already written a cruel, humiliating amendment. The thought of them together still makes my stomach turn. Liam, the man who called me his future. Chloe, the sister who claimed to love me. They were planning my humiliation, and I was paying for the flowers. The realization, when it came, was a physical shock, but it wasn't debilitating. It was clarifying. It turned me into a weapon. The first truly undeniable sign came not from Liam, but from my father. My parents were financially backing the bulk of the wedding, the $70,000 for the flowers alone. One Saturday afternoon, I was with my mother doing a final tasting for the cake, a sickeningly sweet affair involving fondant and too much champagne. My father, usually oblivious, called me. "May, I just saw Chloe leaving Liam's downtown apartment." His voice was low and cautious. It was early, maybe 7:30 a.m. Liam's downtown apartment, the one he kept for late nights at the firm, the one he claimed was just a crash pad. I knew he often stayed there. I didn't know Chloe had the keys. I kept my voice light. "Dad, she's designing his office space, remember? She's probably dropping off fabric samples." My father hesitated. "She was wearing the same dress she wore to your mother's bridge game last night. She looked rushed." I thanked him and hung up. The champagne suddenly tasted like bile. Chloe lived 20 blocks uptown. Why would she be at Liam's crash pad at 7:30 a.m., dressed from the night before? Fabric samples do not require an overnight stay. I started reviewing everything, every interaction, every offhand comment. The patterns emerged, subtle but horrifyingly consistent. The shared dokes. I remembered an incident at an engagement party. Liam made a comment about my type A personality being exhausting. Chloe snorted, but covered it with a cough. Later, when I confronted him gently, Liam said, "Chloe told me that exact phrase this morning. It just slipped out." I dismissed it as him being influenced by her constant negativity. The technology issue. Liam, a stickler for privacy, suddenly switched his phone from an iPhone to a less secure Android model, claiming the encryption was better for his firm. I thought it was strange. Now, I saw it differently. He switched platforms to prevent me, the tech-savvy one, from seeing his text history easily. The cologne, Liam switched from his usual sophisticated scent to a cheaper, musky cologne I hated. I complained. He snapped, which he never did. He said, "I like it. Stop policing everything I do, May." I backed down. Now I realized. The scent transfer was likely the biggest clue. Maybe Chloe preferred the cheaper scent. Maybe he was trying to mask the expensive one on her clothes. I started my discreet investigation that night. The lawyer in me took over. I needed proof, not paranoia. The wedding was in 6 weeks. I had a deadline. First, I checked his financials. I have access to all joint accounts and some of his private bank statements, part of the prenup disclosure. The spending was normal, except for one thing, a recurring charge for a cleaning service at his downtown apartment. He always used the building's service, which was included in the rent. This was an outside company, expensive, and billed to a separate card. Why? To remove traces of a woman who wasn't me. Next, I focused on Chloe. Her social media was always loud. Then, suddenly, it went quiet. No more stories about her new clients or her latest designer handbag. She had gone underground. She was being cautious, but not cautious enough. On her Instagram, she still posted stories, but they were always tagged vaguely. Work mood, inspiration. One story showed a photo of a single, highly specific lithograph. I recognized the frame. It was hanging in Liam's downtown living room. That was the solid piece of circumstantial evidence, the physical object, the link. I didn't confront either of them. Confrontation meant tipping my hand. It meant they could coordinate their stories, destroy evidence, or try to renegotiate the prenup. I couldn't risk that. My revenge needed to be total, and it needed to be legal. I reached out to Ben, my best man. He wasn't just my friend. He was the head of security for an international consulting firm. He knew surveillance, digital forensics, and physical placement. I told him I needed discreet security consulting for a high-value property, giving him a cover story about a jealous ex-business partner. I paid him a large, non-refundable retainer. May, he asked, looking at me over coffee, be honest, is this about Liam? I met his eyes. Ben, I need you to trust my professional judgment. I need absolute, undeniable video and audio proof of a specific breach of contract. He understood. He didn't ask again. He simply said, give me access and I'll give you the receipts. The stress of maintaining the happy bride facade was immense. I was finalizing seating charts while calculating the net worth of my fiancé's betrayal. I smiled through fittings, discussing fabric and lace, while inside my mind, I was designing a legal and financial ambush. My entire body ached. I got 4 hours of sleep a night. I lost 7 pounds in 2 weeks. When people complimented my bridal glow, I just nodded. It wasn't a glow. It was the frantic, hyper-focused energy of a predator preparing a kill. Liam seemed strangely relieved by my lack of attention. He stopped asking me to join him for dinner, claiming he was slammed. He encouraged me to go to the spa, to relax. He was giving me space to plan the wedding, while he and Chloe were using that space to plot my humiliation. They were so confident. They were sloppy. I finalized the last details for the wedding, the chapel, the projector, the sound system. I specifically told the wedding planner, a notoriously high-end and discreet woman, that I wanted the ability to run a surprise video tribute right after the vows. She didn't bat an eye. High net worth clients always have surprises, May. We'll make sure the tech is flawless. The irony was heavy. The only thing they cared about was flawless execution. And so did I. Ben installed the cameras exactly 3 weeks before the wedding. He was a phantom. I gave him access to the downtown apartment using a spare key I had kept. He chose the guest room, the most likely secondary location. He placed 2 micro cameras, one disguised as a smoke detector on the ceiling, the other inside a non-functioning electronic photo frame on the nightstand. They were encrypted, networked, and streamed directly to a secure server under Ben's firm's name. The quality was surprisingly clear. I didn't watch the feed immediately. I couldn't afford to. I was still playing the perfect bride. The final dress fitting, the rehearsal dinner details. I was a robot programmed for performance. It was 10 days before the wedding when I finally looked at the footage. I was sitting at my office desk at 2 a.m. I had just finished redlining a 400-page merger agreement. I needed a distraction. I opened the encrypted file. The first 5 days were blank. Liam came and went, sometimes bringing a work colleague, sometimes a takeout bag. Nothing. Then, on a Friday night, the feed went live. It was immediate and devastating. Liam walked into the guest room, followed by Chloe. They were laughing. The sound was perfectly clear. They didn't even bother to close the door. Liam immediately grabbed her and kissed her, roughly. It wasn't tender or passionate. It was desperate and familiar. They acted like they had been doing this for months. Maybe they had. I sat there, frozen. The fluorescent lights of my office humming. The reality of betrayal is always worse than the anticipation. It felt like an actual physical impact, a punch to the sternum. My lungs seized up. I couldn't breathe. I didn't cry. Crying was a release, and I didn't want release. I wanted combustion. I wanted focus. They talked, and the conversation was the final twisting knife. Chloe was complaining about the seating chart. Honestly, May's obsession with symmetry is going to kill me. Who cares if the Smiths are next to the Joneses? She needs to relax. Liam rubbed her shoulder. It's how she copes, Chloe. She can't control her career now, so she controls the wedding. It's fine. It's almost over. Almost over? You're marrying her! Liam looked genuinely annoyed. Only for the optics, darling. The partnership. The families. You know I can't break the engagement now. The scandal would ruin my promotion. He chuckled. A dark, dismissive sound. Besides, I get the apartment in the prenup if we make it 3 years. Chloe laughed. A high, manic sound. Please, you think she'll stick it out for 3 years with you? She's so cold, Liam. Sometimes I watch her and I think, is she even human? At least I have passion. And then she said the words that solidified my course of action. They were casual, tossed off, the words that cut deeper than the infidelity itself. Imagine how funny it will be when she finds out, the perfect paralegal, completely blind. She always thinks she's so much smarter than everyone. I can't wait to see her face when she realizes she picked the one guy who would choose me. That was it. The motivation shifted entirely. This wasn't about a broken heart. This was about a professional, personal, and familial insult. They hadn't just cheated. They had used me for status and were actively mocking my intelligence. They dared to call me cold. They dared to call me blind. I closed the video file. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from a focused, cold rage. The bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I didn't get angry. I got even, and getting even required the full force of my professional training. I wiped my face with a tissue. I didn't need any more evidence of the affair itself. The clip was sufficient for the prenup clause. Now, I needed to weaponize the prenup itself. I called the senior partner I reported to, Robert Vance, at 3 a.m. He specialized in high-stakes financial warfare. I told him I had a sensitive personal matter that required his firm's top-tier forensic team, strictly off the books. He knew my work ethic. He just said, "Send me the scope, May. We'll start tomorrow." The wedding planning continued, but for me, it was now a performance. Every smile, every "I love you" was a calculated move. I was playing them. I was leading them to the altar, which was, in my mind, the guillotine. I even went to dinner with Chloe 2 nights later. She talked about the floral centerpieces. I talked about her new client base. We were 2 snakes, smiling at each other, waiting for the other to strike. I knew exactly when and where I would strike. She had no idea. The plan was a financial masterpiece. It had 3 phases: legal, technical, and psychological. Phase 1, legal and financial warfare. My first action was to revisit the prenuptial agreement, specifically Clause 7.3b. The clause stipulated that in the event of demonstrable infidelity, the cheater would forfeit any claims to the shared apartment which I technically owned via an LLC, surrender their equity stake in a specific joint investment portfolio, and pay a penalty of $2.50 million to the other party. Robert Vance, my senior partner, was ecstatic. May, this clause is a weapon. It's perfectly drafted. It's almost impossible to fight because of the specificity of the demonstrable proof. However, we needed to make sure Liam couldn't liquefy his assets before the wedding. We found that Liam had recently moved his main investment account into a holding pattern pending the marriage. Vance immediately sent a private, confidential memo to the firm handling the assets, citing an obscure SEC regulation that required a temporary freeze on certain high-value pre-merger assets pending a change of marital status hearing. It was legally thin, but professionally intimidating. The assets were frozen, locking Liam's money in place. Next, the apartment. I had purchased the apartment in an LLC, funding the down payment myself. Liam had been contributing to the mortgage, but the paperwork was ironclad. We drafted the eviction notice and a claim of forfeiture of his contributed funds, ready to be served immediately. Finally, the $2.50 million penalty. This required immediate collection. We set up an irrevocable trust, named the Redemption Fund, and got a court order, signed by a friendly judge. Vance had connections that would allow the immediate transfer of funds from Liam's frozen account upon presentation of the evidence and the prenup post-Whiting objection. Phase 2, technical execution. This was Ben's department. The chapel was booked for the entire day. I told the wedding planner, the surprise video is a multi-screen, immersive experience. This allowed Ben and his team, posing as an AV crew, to set up the giant screen, the directional speakers, and the hidden networking gear. They ran fiber optic cables under the pews. They didn't install the projector until the night before, under the pretense of protecting the delicate equipment. The video itself was a short, sharp documentary. It contained the most damning 30-second clip of Liam and Chloe from the guest room camera. The screenshots of the text messages, synchronized with dramatic music stings, a static slide of Clause 7.3b, enlarged and highlighted in blood red, a scrolling list of the exact assets Liam was forfeiting with their real-time value. Then set up the system to be triggered by the tiny remote in my hand, running a hidden loop that couldn't be interrupted easily. The sound was engineered to be loud, clear, and specifically focused on the altar area. Phase 3, psychological warfare. The key was the timing. It had to be during the ceremony, specifically after the speak now moment. That was the point of no return. It was the moment they thought they had won. I needed Chloe to be in the front row, close enough to witness the total destruction of her life, too. I called her 2 days before, and feigning exhaustion said, "Chloe, I'm so overwhelmed. I need you right up front. Just your calm energy will help me." She beamed. She took it as a sign of my weakness and reliance on her. I bought her a gift, a beautiful inscribed silver locket. I gave it to her at the rehearsal dinner. She opened it, beaming. Inside, I had engraved 2 initials, L and C. I told her it stands for love and sheer. She didn't realize it stood for Liam and Chloe, a tiny physical representation of their eventual ruin. She wore it the next day. I chose my attire carefully. The Vera Wang dress was a symbol of the future he thought he was buying. I wore my most expensive, custom-made pearl earrings. I wanted to look like the cost of his mistake. The final piece was Ben. I told him he had 2 jobs: stand next to me, and when the projection started, physically restrain Liam from doing anything stupid, like grabbing the remote or assaulting me. Ben was ready. He looked like an exceptionally well-dressed bodyguard. The morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling completely empty. Not sad, not angry, just functional. I ate a full breakfast. I did my makeup meticulously. I was going to look flawless for the camera, the one that was recording my final performance, not theirs. I was marrying Liam, but not for life. I was marrying him for a moment of crushing, precise revenge and a massive financial settlement. It was the most professional thing I had ever done. I walked down the aisle, feeling the weight of the moment. I saw Liam's smug face. I saw Chloe's beautiful, expectant smile in the front row. They were looking at a perfect bride walking into their perfect trap. They didn't know the bride had already set fire to the entire castle. The confrontation was less a spontaneous explosion and more a perfectly choreographed hostile takeover. The noise in the chapel after I hit the button was deafening, but Ben's sound system isolated my voice, making it ring out over the pandemonium. As the footage of Liam and Chloe played, I watched their faces. Liam's eyes were darting everywhere, looking for a way out. He kept trying to speak, a bubbling sound coming from his throat. Chloe was silent, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. When the footage finished, the screen cut to the bright red graphic of the prenuptial clause. This was the moment of transfer from emotional betrayal to financial obliteration. I stepped away from Liam, taking the microphone with me. "For those of you who weren't aware," I said, my voice ice cold and amplified. Liam insisted on the fidelity clause. I merely ensured it had teeth. and that those teeth were insured by his entire investment portfolio. I nodded to Ben. He took a sealed envelope from his inner pocket. He didn't speak. He walked to the altar and handed the envelope to the bewildered minister. Minister, I instructed calmly, please read the appendix of the prenuptial agreement, which Ben is holding. This is critical for the legal record. The minister, a very old man, looked completely terrified. He opened the document, his hands trembling violently. He started to read, his voice a shaky murmur that immediately caught the attention of the suddenly hushed crowd. The party of the first part, Liam Alexander Thorne, hereby agrees that in the event of a material breach of trust, defined as infidelity proven by video evidence within 18 months of this ceremony, he shall immediately forfeit and assign. The minister stumbled over the legal jargon. I took the microphone back. He forfeits the ownership of the Tribeca loft, worth $4.10 million. He forfeits his entire stake in the Helios Fund, estimated at $3.70 million. And he is liable for the penalty payment of $2.50 million, which, as of this morning, has been successfully executed via court order and wire transfer from his previously frozen accounts. Silence. The kind of silence that feels physical, like a vacuum. Liam finally found his voice, a high-pitched scream. You can't. That was my life savings. I'll sue you. This is manipulation. I smiled, a thin, professional smile. I'm a litigation paralegal, Liam. You think I didn't stress test the contract? You signed it. Your lawyer approved it. I didn't manipulate you. I simply held you accountable to your own signature. Chloe finally moved. She lunged forward, not at Liam, but at me. Her expensive manicure claws were aimed at my face. You evil bitch! You ruined everything. You were supposed to be blind. Before she could reach me, my mother, who was sitting next to her, suddenly stood up. My mother wasn't physically imposing, but her rage was. She grabbed Chloe by the arm, the one wearing the wrist corsage, and twisted it sharply. You shameless disgrace. My mother spat in Mandarin, her eyes blazing. You sleep with her fiancé for a little attention. You are dead to this family. Dead. My mother dragged Chloe, kicking and screaming toward a side exit, pulling her past the horrified guests. Chloe's beautiful dress was ripped slightly, a satisfying little tear in the silk. Meanwhile, Ben and two plainclothes security guards he had stationed nearby had Liam fully contained. Liam wasn't fighting. He had collapsed onto the antique marble floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The sight of a grown man, a powerful investment banker, utterly destroyed and crying on the floor of a chapel full of his peers, was the perfect psychological finish. I took the remote and turned off the prime. So sorry. There is no way I can do that. The screen immediately retracted into the ceiling. The chapel was returned to its quiet, ornate state, but it was now permanently stained by the reality of the betrayal and the sound of sobbing. There will be no wedding today, I announced to the silent guests. However, the bar is open. Please enjoy the food and the orchestra. I apologize for the cancellation and the unscheduled presentation. I nodded to the wedding planner, who looked like she needed a week off. I turned and walked, calmly and slowly, down the aisle. My head was high. The heavy Vera Wang dress suddenly felt light. I reached the doors, where a black car was waiting. Just before I stepped into the car, I glanced back. Liam was still on the floor, surrounded by security. Chloe was gone, expelled by my own mother. My revenge was complete. It was public, financial, and utterly devastating. I had won the legal battle, the moral argument, and the financial settlement. The contract had been breached, and the penalty had been exacted. The days following the confrontation were a blizzard of legal and social fallout. It was exactly as I had planned. Total destruction followed by clean, surgical closure. Liam was in legal and financial hell. The wire transfer of the $2.50 million was finalized 3 hours after the ceremony. The prenup, which he signed, was the only document that mattered. His law firm, embarrassed by the public spectacle and the exposure of his personal instability, placed him on immediate administrative leave. He couldn't access his frozen funds. He couldn't pay his own lawyer. He was living in a tiny studio apartment, evicted from the loft I now formally owned. His career was over. His reputation was toxic. The revenge was total. Chloe's fallout was worse. Her career was built entirely on high society networking. My mother, who valued reputation above all else, disowned her publicly within 24 hours. My mother sent a cold, concise email to every major family contact, detailing Chloe's shameful and destructive behavior and explicitly stating she was no longer welcome at family events. Chloe lost 3 major design contracts within a week. The locket I gave her was returned to my mother by mail, smashed and bent. She tried to contact me, sending rambling, tearful texts blaming Liam. I blocked her number without reading past the first sentence. My own life became instantly, fiercely independent. I didn't get married, but I gained a fortune, an apartment, and a promotion. Robert Vance was so impressed with my legal precision under duress that he promoted me from senior paralegal to director of contract compliance and strategy, a new, highly paid role created just for me. He called the whole event the finest example of preemptive financial litigation he had ever witnessed. I was now a legend in the firm. I sold the Tribeca loft 7 months later for a nice profit. I used the money, combined with the $2.50 million penalty, to purchase a beautiful, minimalist penthouse overlooking Central Park. It was mine. No shared accounts, no expectations, no secrets. 1 year later, I was on a solo trip to the Maldives. It was everything I wanted: quiet, remote, and luxurious. I was reading a fascinating legal journal by the infinity pool when I received an email notification. It was from an unknown sender. I almost deleted it. Then I saw the name, Liam. The subject line was just, "Why?" I read the short, pathetic email. He was working a terrible commission job. He was broke. He was angry. He wanted to know why I had to do it publicly, why I couldn't have just broken up with him quietly and taken the money. I took a picture of my view, the perfectly blue ocean, the white sand, my glass of very expensive champagne resting on the railing. I attached the photo to the email. My response was brief. I drafted it carefully, as always. Subject, re. Why? Liam, the contract required demonstrable evidence. A private breakup would have allowed you and Chloe to mitigate damages, destroy evidence, and potentially file a countersuit. You mocked my intelligence and my professionalism. I utilized my professional training to ensure a maximum financial outcome and irreversible professional and social consequences for both parties involved in the breach. You got what you signed up for. Enjoy your commission job. May. I hit send. I deleted the email from my sent box. I put my phone down and ordered another glass of champagne. The sun was setting over the Indian Ocean. I didn't feel rage or satisfaction or regret. I felt the deep, simple peace that comes from absolute control. I was no longer the put-together woman waiting for a man to give her security. I was the architect of my own flawless, devastating victory.